Okay, let's start for today's shiur. There is a shiur tomorrow from somebody else, so that's why I'm giving a shiur today. Start at Sif Yud Gimel. First, I'm going to summarize a little bit of what the Torah says, and I go into another discussion with Alter Rebbe discusses of it. It's two very important Yesodis that we're going to go through today from the Alter Rebbe that are relevant to the beginning of Sif Yud Gimel and the Mechaber before we get the Ramah. That's why I want to speak about it now, and we'll discuss the Ramah and we'll sing the Ramah afterwards. First, just quickly summarize the Torah and the Shulchan Aruch talk about if it were to kriyas veses, to make a veses kavua, you need to have 3 times in the same oina. And the example they bring is from a chodesh. So that is regarding, so to speak, kriyas veses for months, for days. And then in the kriyas veses chodesh, 3 times, and it has to be in the same oina, either daytime or nighttime. But if it's day, then night, then day, even if it's the same day on the calendar, it doesn't count as a veses kavua. The Bes Yosef over there brings this the Yesod of this from the Ravid. That's the Yesod of this. So basically, the vestes that are dependent on days. We're going to soon explain what exactly that means. We're soon going to see what exactly that specifically means. When the vestes is depending on a date in the calendar, you only fleishish in the oina that you saw, and therefore you could only be keveya in the oina that you saw. Therefore, if she's keveya, so now what happens is if she's keveya for a daytime oina 3 times in the day, and then the 4th time she saw at night, or she was keveya 3 times at night and the next time she saw at day, then the veses kavua is not nekar. Why is the veses kavua not nekar? Because she sees you have to pass it 3 times. And now you have a new oinas chashash, which is either the night or the day, whichever one is different than the previous 3. So she's choshesh the next month, choshesh both night and day. Based on the veses kavua that was before, and based on the veses and the chashash veses that there is now, until she's oiker the veses kavua, or she makes a new veses kavua. Right, so now the Alter Rebbe over here comes in. This is just what I told you is based on Taz and the Shach. The Alter Rebbe comes in Sifkot Lamed Vav, and he explains to you 2 Yesodis. First Yesod is whenever it says Yom over here, the Kavana is Oina. Yom or Laila. It doesn't mean that when you Keveya Veses, it's obviously that's what he's trying to explain to you is when the Shulchan Aruch says you Keveya Veses for Yomim, it means the day. It means the oina. Each oina, you look at it, essentially each oina you look at it independently. And the second point, Alter Rebbe says that the same thing applies also in Veses Aflog. It's a very important point because this is going to go into a Machlekes Achreinim. Also by a Veses Aflog, when it comes to Veses Aflog, you also calculate based on oinas and not based on days. That means the simple, if you want to do the simple reading, according to a lot of people, is that when you calculate a flogis, you go based on days, which means that how many days are between the oinas, how many days are between the flogis, and that could work even according to Alter Rebbe that you go from Seifri to Tchilas. It doesn't make a difference which you calculate. The question is, do you go based on the days? How many days passed between Seifri and Tchilas or Tchilas to Tchilas? Or how many oinas passed? What's the difference about how many oinas passed? If you have 3 times a certain amount of oinas, you're going to end up that it's not going to be the same oina. It'll be day, night, day, night. And then 4 iyas, and the 4th, then you have 3 aflogis. Aflogis shavas is not going to be the same oina. But according to Alter Rebbe, you look only at the oinas. How many oinas are in between? The moment you have 3 sets of equal number of oinas, then it becomes a veses aflaga, regardless of whether the re'iyah was during the day or during the night. It means if the re'iyah was once during the day, next time during the night, day and night, and there was exactly the same oinas between them, then it's going to be a vesses kavua. So now you look and there's a we're going to get to who argues in a second. Yeah. When would you have, technically speaking, a vesses haflogus kavua that would be all in the same aina? Would be when it's one more than the next one. If you have 41, 42, 43, 44, then you will all be either day or night. But if it's an equal number, must be the oinus between them is going to have to be, according to Alter, is going to have to end up at a different time. Day to night, night to day. She sees, let's do a short one. She sees today, daytime. She finishes today. She does hefsek tahara today, before Shkia. Right? And then, now let's count 10 oinus. So it's going to be Sunday night, it's going to be, today's Tuesday. It's going to be Tuesday night, Wednesday night, Thursday night, Friday night, Shabbos night, Sunday day. If she's going, then she's going to see Sunday night. Yeah, so she's going to have, how many oinus is going to have in between? She has 10 in between. Now she's going to go the next time, she's going to count 10. If it's going to be 10 oinus, she's going to see it again. It's 11. Sorry, it's 11. If it's odd, if it's even, if it's odd numbers, if it's odd number, then it's going to be off. If it's going to be 11, it's going to be the same oina. If it's odd number, if it's an even number, then it's going to be off by one oina.
Always starts by one.
Yeah. But if she sees during the day or during the night, question how many oinas are you counting for the oinas hachashash? If she sees Sunday day, then then when is she gonna be choishesh? Choishesh by day, the next time. But if you count the oinas, if you're gonna add the oinas between them, you're gonna end up it's gonna be off by one. If you do the day, if you see,
saying it's going to be an odd number. If she sees by day, it's going to be an odd number.
Yeah, and then it's going to be choishesh at a different time. If she sees at night, and she starts again, it might become a different. If you can see an equal number of oinas, you're going to see it differently. Now, if you always do it based on hefsek tahara, you're not going to have this. You're not going to have this issue because it's always going to start at night, and the next one is also always going to start at night. But if you're going to do based on whenever the blood stops, you might have such a situation. Today it doesn't really apply, but you might have such a situation. You go based on the amount of oinus, not based on the amount of days in between. Where would it be a difference of days in between, which is the shit of the Noida B'Yehuda? It's not going to help you. Yeah, but then you still have the issue. Oh, yeah, it's true. Yeah, could be. That solves the issue of the Behuda. Yeah. So we're going to get to the Behuda now. So there's the Pischei Tshuva Sifkot and Tes brings the Behuda. Sifkot and Tes, I think. Yes, Sifkot and Tes brings the Behuda. The Behuda had a question from Rav David Teveli, where he says as follows. Says, even though the Shulchan Aruch brings an example of days, still in all, the same thing applies also in the Gea Flogus. The question of the same thing applies to Gea Flogus, that it has to be on the same oina. To be able to be kriveya a veses, chashash, it has to be also in the same oina, not only the amount of a flogus. That's how he he asks about it. That's how he asks the Noda Behuda. And he says that he has a question, what happens if she sees the first time in the day, and the second time she sees at night? Yeah, so then are you going to count the amount of oinus between them, or are you going to count the amount of days between them? The minor nafka mina is going to be, is if it's going to be the amount of oinus between them, then the next time when when does she have to be choishesh? It's going to be choishesh on the day. But if you're going to go based on days, then the next time she's going to be choishesh, it's going to be the night afterwards. Because if she's going to see the earlier day, then maybe an amount of aflagos will be the same amount of aflagos. But when it comes to amount of days, it's going to be 1 day less, because it's half a day before. It's the day before on the calendar. The night after, it's already the next day on the calendar. So she's going to have to count. If you count based on days, you're going to end up that she's going to have to be choishesh the next day. If you count aflagos based on days, not based on oinus. If you count based on oinus, she's going to see on the 28th day, the example that he brings. And if you're going to go based on days, she's going to have to be choishesh on the 29th day, or either 27, 28, or 28, 29. I don't remember exactly the dogma that he brings over there. And therefore, the David Teveli writes to him that being that the Mechaber Paskins, that every oina is counted independently, so also regarding Vesas Afloga, you have to go according to the number of oinus, not according to the number of days. Which is essentially like the Alter Rebbe says. You go based on the number of oinus. Now there are certain shittas which understand that David Teveli does not agree with the Alter Rebbe fully. We're going to get to it. That it has to also be the same oina, the same day or night, not only amount of oinus, but from the simple reading of his question, it seems like the question is not in the Pesach Tshuva fully. Only the way Noda Behuda quotes him. The Noda Behuda, the new print, has the question the way he actually wrote it, and you see that he's totally masking. He's the same shit as Alter Rebbe. The Noda Behuda disagrees on him. The Noda Behuda comes and says that when it comes to the time when you have to be choishesh, then being it's a vesher in a kavua, and she saw the last time during the day, you're going to go after when you're going to be choishesh. You're going to have to be choishesh at the time when she saw. But when it comes to establishing a vesher, choishesh based on the amount of days, and therefore she will be choishesh the night. She'll be choishesh on that night. If she's going to see that night, she's going to be kaveh vesher, because that's the amount of days. If she sees at that night, she's going to be kaveh vesher because the days are equal. The days between the aflogos, the amount of days between the re'iyas are equal. And the Pesach Tshuva comes and he explains the Yesod of Noda Behuda. And this goes back to what I said before regarding the Raiva, that what's vesher is depending on the day, vesher is depending on the aflog. He says when it comes to vesher HaChodesh, we are always makpid on which oina she sees it. Why are we makpid? Because we say this specific day, this woman has a specific, her body is a stronger body. So when she sees, it's based on a specific day in the month. It's stable, it's organized, and if she sees a specific day of the month, those are specific oina. Something happens, whether it's the moon is standing over here in the sky or whatever it is, she sees on this specific time. So therefore, to be able to establish a Vesas HaChodesh, which is dependent on the day of the month and not on the body, then you have to establish it based on the specific oina when it happens. But when it comes to aflagah, what do we say? When it comes to aflagah, we say it's not the day that caused it. The question is which amount of oinas that passed caused it. Yeah, it means the oina caused it. But how many? But not mamish the amount of oinas. It means how many days pass between one re'iyah and the next re'iyah. That her body has 22 days, 24 days, 28 days, 30 days, whatever the number is. The amount of days that pass, after the amount of days pass, that's when the body starts seeing again. So therefore, when it comes to aflog, it says you go based on the day. And there is no difference whether it is a day oina or a night oina. If you have an equal amount of aflogis of days between the oinas, she's kriveya eveses for aflogis. Only one oina. The oina when she saw, because chashash re'iyah is the oina when she sees. So it comes out we have a machloikas regarding a vessel she'ena kavua when she sees during the day and afterwards she sees at night. That according to the David Tavli, you go based on the oinas. According to the beauty, you go based on the days. The only thing is that when you're choishesh, according to the Yehuda, when do you have to separate? That's on the oina of separation is the time when she saw the previous vessels. But when it comes to for kveya vessels, it has to be that way. And regarding kviyas vessels, so according to the Alter Rebbe and according to Rabbi David Tavli, the simple reading of him, it's enough three. If you have the same amount of oinas, doesn't make a difference if it's on the same oina or not. And it doesn't make a difference if the days are equal or not. As long as you have an equal amount of oinas, that is enough to 3 times the equal amount of oinas, that is enough to make a veses kavua.
Isn't oinas appreciated because of the chash that she's going to be kiveh veses kavua?
And Saprisha is because she's a chashash that she's going to see blood then at the same time that she saw last time.
So why is there a difference if it's just Saprisha or do you kiveh veses?
Because for any Saprisha you have to go based on the last time she saw before your kveya.
Well, the chash is that she's going to be kiveh.
You have to. So if she's going to see the same oina as last time, she's not going to be able to be kveya because it's off by a day. So she's going. So now let's go back to Alter Rebbe. Now the next part of the Shulchan Aruch discusses if she sees, which I mentioned before, if she sees 3 times during the day, and then she saw once at night, or the other way around, that she saw 3 times at night and once during the day, and we say she has to be choishesh to both of them. The Alter Rebbe in Sifkat Lamed Zayin Lamed Ches brings what the Tas says, explains that you choishesh. Why you choishesh to the first one? Because it wasn't nekar. If it was 3 times day and then night, still have to be choishesh for the day because it wasn't nekar yet, or 3 times night then day, have to be choishesh for the one that wasn't nekar yet. And you also have to be choishesh for the one that she saw last time. If she saw the opposite, she saw day instead of night, or night instead of day, you have to be choishesh for that one. And then the Alter Rebbe adds something which is not written in the other places. It says, if the last one is at day, it means she saw 3 times during the day. Sorry, she saw 3 times at night. Then she saw during the day. And then the next time, Hekdima Lirois Belayla, she saw the night before the day that she saw last time. And she continued seeing in the day. This is not enough to be oiker the veses achodesh. So she has a veses, or either it's a veses kavur, even if we're going to discuss when it comes to veses kavur, to be able to be oiker it, if she saw before the time she's supposed to, or even if veses shenikah, she to be oiker chashash. You can't be oiker a chashash if she started seeing right before a chashash of a veses achodesh. You can't be oiker it if she started seeing before, and it continued into the oina of the chashash. She saw the night, and she continued to the oina of the chashash. It was the day. That's the one on the calendar. So we don't say, oh, she didn't start the period during the day. Let's erase it off the calendar. No, she saw during the day. It stays on the calendar. Right? We're going to explain this in a second. Now just go to in 2 Sifkotans later. In Sifkot Mem, the Alter Rebbe discusses when she sees the last time at night, it didn't continue, and it did not continue into the day afterwards. Then all you could be oiker is a veses achodesh, but not a veses aflagah. And that Alter Rebbe is going to explain it different later on in Sifkat Gimel. When we get to the Ramah, we're going to get to it. I'm not going to explain it now. Okay, let's go back to what we said before. If Igdima Lira is Belayla, if she saw it the night before the day that she was expecting to see it, for the veses achodesh, bnimshech riyos b'sei chayim l'neker ma she'igdima bilvad. Now Alter Rebbe says, like I'll explain the Kaman. Where is the Kaman? Sifkat Nesamaches. Sifkat Nesamaches, Alter Rebbe discusses regarding Akira, regarding being oiker a veses achodesh, that kol shelo yirasa b'yoyim vesta kavua gimel pa'amim nekar ve'ena cheshesh lo. If it passes 3 times that she did not see in the veses kavua, it becomes nekar and she's not cheshesh to it anymore. Even if every time she saw the Vesas before, the Vesas came before the day on the calendar, the Vesas Kavua, as long as the Re'iyah did not continue into the Einas HaVesas. Yeah, seemingly you have a similar thing also in Sifkat and Gimel. You have the same lashon over there, and also there's a Kuntur Sach, and you might be able to be medayik from there. Yep, and in Sifkat and Gimel, what the Alter Rebbe says over there is talking about that if a woman is makdim 2 or 3 days, you have to be payrish 2 or 3 days. Yeah, 2 or 3 days before the date on the calendar. So Alter Rebbe already explains it doesn't mean that she has to be payrish all the 2 and 3 days. You know this already from Simon Kuf Pidalad. Rather, you have to be payrish. You have to be makdim the oina of pretty sure 2 or 3 days earlier. Not that you have to be payrish the whole 2 or 3 days that she sees the blood. Yeah. Even though she was mamshech the re'iyah into the yom vesta kavua. Now, when you look at the simple lashon of the Alter Rebbe, what does it mean? That if a woman has a vesas kavua, let's say for Gimel every month, and then she sees on Beis, and it continues into Gimel, and that happens 3 times, she's not oiker vesas. Same thing if she has a chashash, it's not vesas she'eina kavua. She sees on Gimel, the next month she's going to see on Beis. She saw Gimel by night. The next time she saw Beis by day, or whichever way is going to work, and it was nimshach into the oina when she saw, or she saw on Gimel, but not on the same oina. She saw Gimel day, and then she saw Gimel at night. So then it was nimshach. It's not oiker, the chashash. Comes on this the Ali Yosef. Yeah, so this is one school of thought. Comes on this the Ali Yosef in Sifkat and Tzadik Vav and Tzadik Zayin. That's page 388 in the book I gave you. It's a short Ali Yosef, which he explains the Alter Rebbe in 3 ways. First, he explains how he looks at it, 2 ways, and then he explains how the rest of the world looks at it. It's a very short Ali Yosef. It brings everything, all the things over there. He starts and says as follows. He says, the reason that the Alter Rebbe Stam wrote it simply, that it's page 388. It's Sifkot and Tzadik Vav, Tzadik Zayin. It's the same. You see, it's all the Yosef, Sifkot and Tzadik Vav is on the bottom. On the top it's called Seifim, and the bottom Sifkot. He says over here, he says the simple lashon, he was just like Soisim Dvarov. Yeah, like by a Peisekas. What's a Peisekas? Someone who stopped seeing and started seeing again. So the first explanation of the Ali Yosef, we're going to explain why the Ali Yosef, what they're going after. The first explanation of the Ali Yosef is, what are we talking about? What is Alter Rebbe talking about over here? That he doesn't delete it from the calendar. She saw at night, she stopped, and she started seeing again during the day. And therefore, being that there's a new, so to speak, a new re'iyah during the day, so therefore you can't erase it from the calendar because she saw on that day. Just as a side point, and if you want to be medayik from the lashon of Alter Rebbe and Kuntur Sachin and Sifkat and Hey, which we're also going to get to later, is connected to Sifkat and Gimel with Alter Rebbe. Over there, he also, when he describes Himshicha, he says Himshicha bli lahafsik bli shifsika b'ntayim. But if Siko b'ntayim, then Chazal Vesta Kavu. It's a different. We're going to get to it. We're going to get to it at a different time. But the Nikud over there, the lashon al Rebbe is when it comes to what's Himshicha v'lo Yifsika. He doesn't say that the concept of Himshicha is a standard Himshicha might be without Hifsika. Standard Himshicha is with Hifsika. Yeah, the Himshicha over here. The first reason is, he says, the first explanation of Alter Rebbe is talking about Hifsika. She saw at night, she stopped, She started again the day, and that's why it goes in the calendar. Why is that? Very simple reason. We know from Siman Kuf Pei Daled, Sifkot Mechav Beis, the Alter Rebbe over there explains the beginning of Sifkot Mechav Beis, which we went through. Basar Tchilas Haveses Azlinon. Yeah, he's talking about over there when he's discussing about if you see before Netzach Hama, it's Nimshach Levet after Netzach Hama, it's a short Re'iyah, or if we have a longer one, it's Basar Tchilas Haveses Azlinon. Ve'ein leser sh'ar oinus mishum shas haveses atzma k'mei beroi re'iyah merubo koyin Netzach Hama dehosam gabadover muot shenimshach b'yem svara li yiznechsha b'kol re'iyah achas merubo. When it starts a little bit before and continues a little bit after, we consider the whole thing as a re'iyah. What's a re'iyah achas? He explains later. Mashenkin hocha ein svara li yiznechsha b'kol re'iyah achas asher ikar re'iyah tchilosa v'ashar tisefes dami shenitois rubo. When you want to put something on the calendar, you have to look at when the Ikar Re'iyah is. The concept Ikar Re'iyah. Everything else is Tesefes Damen. Ikar Re'iyah means the main flow. Whatever comes afterwards is Tesefes Damen. Sometimes when you have a very small period that starts early, starts right before Nets, ends right after Nets, she's Chodesh only that time. Why is that? Because that's the Ikar Re'iyah. It's two separate aynas. The Ikar Re'iyah doesn't get cut when Nets comes. When it's a long period, we say, no, the Ikar Re'iyah wasn't that ayna. All the other aynas are Tesefes Damen. When? For the time. Yeah, we can get to it soon. We'll get to that in the point in a minute. Now, so the first explanation, like I said, is that it goes based, it's similar to Pesachas. She stops and she starts. So now, when's the Ikar Re'iyah? The Ikar Re'iyah is before, at night, and then she has another Ikar Re'iyah during the day, so she has to, that doesn't delete off the calendar. The second explanation that he says is as follows. He says that there was a Re'iyah, a short Re'iyah. Why is that? He says, because if it's Shefas, if it's a long period that started at night and continued 2-3 days later, Kuf Pedal, just like I just mentioned, we go only based on the Ikar Re'iyah, that's only one we're Choshesh to. So it doesn't make sense that she would mark on the next day also that if she started at night and it continued through the day, it would be a problem. It would be marked on the calendar the next day because, or it would make a Veses Kavua or not remove it from the calendar, whichever one you want to go on. Why is that? Because we don't mark that. It's Tesefes Damen. The only way it would work, the second way it would work, is if she saw a small period and was Nimshach into the day and then it stopped. So we say the day is also part of the Ikar Re'iyah. And therefore it's not Nekah and it's Kevei Aveses because that's considered the Ikar HaRe'iyah. Chodesh for the miut, yeah? Yeah, Ali Yosef doesn't discuss that Nekuda. Doesn't get into that. Then comes Ali Yosef and concludes and says, but you could also understand Alter Rebbe is talking about Shefas. Yeah, but Tzorich La'ayin Oid Lifsik La'alocha Af L'chumra, he leaves it in the Tzorich Chiyun, which one of the three ways to go. Now, there's a Piska Dinim to the Tzemach Tzedek. First way is Hifsika. Second way is there was a short period, it was only Nimshach into the next part of the day, shortly, and that's why it's still considered Ikar Re'iyah. And the third way, which is a Pashtas Lashon Alter Rebbe, is that it's if she Imshicha, and then you have a Shaila. Why? You have a problem how to understand. Either way of the three ways, you're going to have a problem to understand that you have a kasha on each one of the three explanations. So now, the American Rabbanim paskened like Pashtus Lashon Alter Rebbe, and that's how a lot of poskim understood Alter Rebbe. That's Yisrael Dik Rabbanim paskened like the Ali Yosef, and there was years and years of arguments in Krefsi Agdotera about how to look at it. Being that the early Yosef is essentially it was a Talmud of the around that generation, so he was closer to that time frame. Also, you have a Piskei Dinim from the Tzemach, not from the Tzemach Tzedek, from the Talmud of the Tzemach Tzedek on Siman Kuf Peites, which wasn't printed in the book I gave you. I forgot to put it in. I have to print it for you separately. No, that's Piskei Dinim from the Alter Rebbe. From the Tzemach Tzedek, I mean. There's an additional. There's Piskei Dinim. I don't think it's in there. Yeah. That starts from Kuf Tzaddik. There's Kuf Peites also, which is not there. It wasn't printed in the book. I have to print it for you separately. I forgot to put it into the book. Over there, it's also you could understand him that he follows the shit of the Oli Yosef also. So you have two from that like a generation after the Alter Rebbe that followed that understanding, the Oli Yosef, and no, the main ones, not the what's in the end. That you could also understand the Alter Rebbe with Tzarech Layin. Oh, it's a way from the Tzemach Tzedek, from the Piskei Dinim of that's in it. That's Talmud of Tzemach Tzedek. It looks like a second explanation, not the Psik of it also. Now, being that this was a established machlekes, so anybody who has time on their hands, there's about 20 pages in Tarek Halacha of Rabbi Farkash. It goes through and explains why the only way to understand the Alter Rebbe is the Oli Yosef. But again, when it comes to paskening, it's going to be whoever gives you a heter at all is going to tell you which way to ask, which way to pasken. We don't know. Agree to change? Why would they agree to change? Would they agree to change? Because I mentioned it, I don't know, a bunch of times last year. I'm going to mention it again. I don't think I mentioned it this year. There's a Rav asked the Rebbe 3 shilas. The minor was printed in liquid minus also, but when the minor was printed, it was only a question on. They only quoted one of the questions. I asked about a somebody who's regarding putting on tefillin on somebody who has his koyach is in one hand and he writes in the other hand. That it's mashma from the Tzemach Tzedek one way and the Rabbanim pasken differently. Ziknei Rabbani Anash pasken differently. And the Rebbe wrote the Ziknei Rabbani Anash also knew what the Tzemach Tzedek wrote, and if they pasken differently, they also know to follow what the Ziknei Rabbani Anash do. And he understood it. He didn't disagree with Alter Rebbe. He explained it. Alter Rebbe, he says, because of it, the problem is.
Isn't there a that explains that I'm over there, that it's half a means that it started earlier. And one of that friends explains that I'm on. They have a question.
One of the I think it's based on the sort of the Rishonim. It's a mention of something over there. Do you count them as independent? Shiur and Ramban each day is counted independently.
So there's they have someone that holds that it flows. That if it flows from the front, that's what the most high when he said if it started 2 days earlier, it means that it's flows from that and it's not like the.
It's not Oiker the Vesus.
Yeah, that's he explains that from there.
Right. So there is like this. The problem. Whichever way you're going to take it, you have a problem. The problem with the Oli Yosef is just not fit into the Lashon of the Alter Rebbe. You have to be medayik in Alter Rebbe to fit it into. If you're going to take it the other way, the Alter Rebbe goes into the whole length of explaining Kuf Pei Daled that you only go after Ikar Re'iyah, even though he does not mention regarding Kviyas, doesn't discuss Kviyas messes over there. So you can be medayik. If you want to be medayik, that to be medayik in Alter Rebbe, that you have to, that you have to say that you only mark the beginning of the period if it's a longer period. You can't go more than that. You can't do. So whichever way you're going to take it, you're going to have questions on it. As I'm telling you is that I'm not telling you which way to paskin. Most people, even the certain, one second. That's not. That's I'm going to tell you specifically which way to paskin. Say like whoever's going to give you a heter is going to tell you which way you should paskin. I'm not going to tell you which way to paskin. I'm going to continue the shiur. I'm going to continue. Tomorrow's going to be a different shiur, but I'll continue this in a different topic.